Right, John, you saucy minx. I think it's high time we ask you some questions.
I'm ready.
What is the first book you remember reading and enjoying?
That's a good one. Do you remember book fairs at school where it was like you're at primary
Hell
school and they
yes.
wheeled out these weird metal boxes on wheels and then they open them and there's just a load of books in there and they all looked amazing?
Yeah, you'd always get those like scholastic, like miniature versions of the Argos catalogue that just had hundreds of books in.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like,
Oh.
I'm going to circle the books I want and circle everything in the thing.
It was such an odd thing to do to children, that, like,
Yeah.
especially, you know, if you didn't grow up wealthy or whatever, which I definitely did not.
Yeah.
So I would just aspirationally be ticking boxes for books that I was definitely not going to buy.
Oh yeah.
But when the ones
was
you did get were
boxes,
special, weren't
weren't
they?
they?
You know, you remember
They were
those?
very special, yeah.
I think
Yes, very
I
much
got
so.
one called The Dark Portal by Robin Jarvis, and it was. Can I do a spoiler for it? Because the ending is so genius. I reckon I'm gonna. Should I give it away?
Joe, it's a kid's book from, I'm assuming, the
The
90s.
distant past.
You could probably drop a spoiler.
You're right. And if Robin's listening, I apologise. So it was mice who lived in like a society in a basement in Deptford, and the rats lived in the sewer. But the dynamic was rats, stupid, savage, brutal, but thick. So they couldn't kind of muster themselves into a coherent kind of army to do any kind of uprising. So the mice were kind of okay. And then the story was that the rats had found this new god sort of deep in the sewers, and so the dark portal was this literally a dark alcove, I guess, and all you could see of Jupiter, their new rat god, was just these two burning eyes. So the two burning eyes are on the cover, and that's why I bought the book. And just so good. And obviously there's a quest and it was kind of a bit horror-y. There was quite a lot of gore in there for a kid's book, and it sort of explains a lot. Anyway, the big twist ending that I'm dying to reveal. There was all this speculation through half the book. It's like, what does Jupiter look like? He's so horrible to behold. You know, a giant rat or a two-headed rat, and all these ideas. And then the big reveal ending was he was a mangy cat, and he'd been duping all of his followers all along. And I thought, that's brilliant.
See,
that is cool. I like that term.
what you just described is in fact Coriolanus, I believe.
There's fewer mice than Coriolanus, I think.
The rats are the Ophidius and a Sicilian bunch, isn't he?
Okay, yeah. The sort of the barbarians.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yes, no, it's got a bit of that too, hasn't it?
I'm smart. I'm picking on what you're putting down.
I'm not sure about
the cheese.
But who's the Jupiter character in this?
This is Caius Marcius.
When does he?
Catiolanus.
I feel like we're going deep here. Oh,
this might be the answer. That might be where he got the idea from. I'm looking through the character list now.
It sounds like it could be a riff, yeah.
I think I might just be mental.
No. Please keep it coming, my friends. Keep challenging my perceptions. I love it. This whole sort of anthropomorphizing animals thing for kids is such a good cheap way to get violence in kids' books, isn't it? Like, if you think about all the Redwall stuff and even the more recent stuff, like, I guess it's not recent anymore, but like Mouse Guard, the sort of like graphic novels that are sort of, they're all about mice that have organized into armies and defend their life against.
And it's been going for ages. Like Watership Down.
Yep.
One of the most brutal blooming stories. The original movie version of that is basically a grotesque horror film, and yet it's like, oh, kids animated film with rabbits in, U certificate, and it really shouldn't be.
But even stuff like Animorphs, where obviously the kids can't break into a secure facility and kill 100 guards, but if they were to turn into a tiger and do it, well, then it was the tiger that did it. So you're absolutely right, Ben.
Oh, well, that is fantastic. And as you say, I think we can see where your love of darker fiction comes from then, if that's the sort of first book that sticks in your mind.
And there's just a few, there's a few that sort of I think you remember when you used to get audio cassettes. So it's like you go into your parent, your mum and dad can't be asked to read your book, so they just whack a cassette on instead. And there was a Ladybird, allegedly kids abridged versions of classic horror books.
Oh yeah,
and I think, and there was a Dracula one, a Frankenstein one. I had all them, and there was one that was just called The Mummy, and it was an Arthur Conan Doyle short story that's originally called Lot Number 249, but they must have thought kids won't get what that's on about, so let's just call it The Mummy. And you can still find like the audio cassette on YouTube, and if you have a spare 45 minutes, give it a listen. It is absolutely blood-chillingly terrifying. So yeah, there was just all this stuff you could get access to weirdly when I was a kid.
What I'm going to need you to do is link us, and we'll like retweet it on Twitter or something. We'll see if we can get some traction going for this recording.
Definitely.
Oh, a resurgence for The Mummy. There we go. Right. This is getting. I'm enjoying this far too much already. Do you have props around you when you write to provide inspiration?
Oh, that's interesting. They're not. Are they props? I've got some like horror-y paraphernalia that I thought, let's just buy this. This will be cool. So like a fake skull, and I've got like a creepy mannequin. And then sometimes you just forget because you get used to your stuff, don't you? And it's just there.
Yeah.
And then like the other day, I think we had some bloke round to like measure up for some posh blinds, and he sort of came in and screamed when he saw this mannequin because I forgot to warn him about it.
It's a feminine posh blind man.
And he looked a bit uncomfortable for the rest of the visit.
You characterize people so quickly. I love it. It's so good. It takes me ages to get going to lampoon someone that hard, but you've completely summoned and crucified that guy in front of us in like 2 seconds. It's fantastic.
You just reminded me of a thing. I've got to tell this story quickly. Our landlady came to the flat for the first time. We've been in 2 years. The first time she ever visited, and I have quite a large Warhammer collection, and they're all there in one of the cabinets. And she stopped in front of it, looked very confused for a moment, and said, and I quote, "What's this you're collecting here? Is it Pokemon?" I was like so spiritually offended. Well, no, those are over there. That's the Pokemon shelf.
Yeah, that's the other cabinet in the other room.
Did you make her like sit down and play Pokemon with you?
No, I just, you have that moment you're like, I'm never going to be able to connect to this person on any level other than here's the rent that you make me pay you.
Yeah, here's the extortionate rate that you charge.
Because you don't want to find yourself falling into like a nerd trap, do you? Being like, I think you'll find these are orcs.
It would actually be funnier if she had like a really solid understanding and working knowledge of the different factions inside Warhammer armies.
It's like Imperial Fists. What are you, a scrub?
Yeah. She like takes down your army choice. Oh, very good. Yeah, just on the skull thing, I actually do have a little skull here as well. It's really wobbly though. I don't know about yours, but because mine was like a candle that as you burnt it, the red wax came out of the eyes. But unfortunately, it all kind of dripped down one side. So it constantly looks like he's looking at me kind of quizzically as I'm writing. And I did find myself during this one that I was writing earlier this week, and just sort of looking at him and going, I know it needs a bit more. I felt myself like tripping over that edge of sanity during writing. So I've turned him round.
So her skull is giving bad anxiety while he writes. But what gives you satisfaction while you're writing?
Oh, segue. Impressively done.
Thank you.
I think it's, when you just feel like you've nailed the thing you were going for, particularly like with endings, whether it's the end of a short story or the end of a chapter. So your brilliant ending in the other episode where we read out the triangle prompt, and it was the one about, some of the bodies didn't seem to have skin at all. And it was like, oh, chilling, I am now chilled, and, goosebumps everywhere. And like that feeling of, I've managed to create in myself the feeling I want the reader to feel. And obviously, you can't guarantee that's the case, but you have an idea that it's gonna be effective, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. That do you know when you've done it, or does it take a while for it to sort of sink in?
I I'm usually aiming for it. So I'm writing with that desired feeling impact in mind. And so I might have a couple of cracks at it, or it might come straight away. So you write your little one sentence, punchy, this is it. And then when you feel that, oh yeah, I've creeped myself out a bit there, or made myself sad, or made myself disgusted, or whatever feeling it is you're going for, I find that very satisfying.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's
Good.
always really lovely to hear someone explain why they enjoy the thing that they're on here to talk about, isn't it? I always like hearing those answers.
It must be particularly satisfying as well, because I'm sure we've all been there with this is what I want to evoke, and as you're writing, you're like, why isn't it happening?
Yeah.
What's missing? But then as soon as that switch goes, you go, that's me for the day. Lovely.
That's it.
Right, tough one, tough time. What is your favourite novel?
It is House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski.
I think we're going to need some more details on that one.
Oh well, if you've never encountered House of Leaves, I strongly recommend. So it's an American author. It came out in the year 2000. It's quite hard to explain what it is, but I'll have a go. It's like it's almost like a mixed media. So the book is like a big thick textbook, and it's ostensibly some bloke has moved into an apartment that was previously occupied by an elderly man who has now died. And he's found in there this book that guy had pieced together, which seems to be a critique of a film, the film being a documentary about a house, the house being a place where a family moved in and found that there was like impossible spaces inside the house, like it was bigger inside than it was outside. So the family call in these other people to help figure this out. By the end, there's an entire labyrinth opened up inside the house that they're lost in. It starts to drive people mad. Some of these people who are these sort of explorers are killing each other. And so it's a sort of book within a book within a book. It goes for this real, like, as the character's psychological state is deteriorating, so is yours, reader. Here's an upside down page, and here's a page with wonky text. And so you're having to kind of rotate the book around while you're reading it. And by about 2/3, you suddenly realise it's like, oh my God, am I reading this book or is this book reading me? Do you know what I mean? It's just a really weird experience. But
it's also
Filth, the Irvine Welsh book, the with the tapeworm bit.
I'll say about House of Leaves as well. It's a absolute brick of a book.
Yeah,
I've never seen an edition of it that you couldn't use to kill a fully grown man.
Oh, was this one that you know from when you worked in a bookshop?
Yes.
Oh wow! Is it sort of famous because it's so sort of thick and weird?
So it's like not the how-to guide on page layout, but the how the fuck not to guide on page layout. But it's like, this is what is possible. Don't, please don't. But
someone did it right once. Don't do it.
Don't to its credit. Like, if you did it now, you would just be aping it, and there's no way you could achieve what.
So that was actually my follow-up question. Have you ever experimented with typography and stuff and layouts in your?
Yeah, no, I have. As you was saying, Nico, it's, I guess publishers frown upon it and don't want you to do it.
They did not mean to preemptively shit on you there, man.
No, that is definitely the reaction. But I sort of got away with it with one book for whatever reason. They were just very generous about it. It was me. The second novel is called Never Rest. Nice big eyeball on the cover. It's a kind of murder mystery. It's actually a disappearance that is the detective is trying to solve rather than a murder at the outset. And the idea is the guy who's gone missing had some psychological problems, and he'd been living alone in this house that he'd scribbled all over the walls, and there were notes piled up everywhere, and bits of string linking things together, the classic. And so the detective whose point of view the book is written from is trying to unravel this, what the hell was this guy doing, and there's so much to read. So then you could kind of intersperse the chapters with stuff that he was reading, and then you could kind of blur the stuff he was reading with what was actually happening, because he was sort of not sleeping enough and starting to lose his own mind a little bit. So you could do some quite cool stuff with the layout of the chapters and so on, which I was dead pleased with. So
That's
that was
fascinating.
fun.
Nice one. Did you self-publish this one?
No, this was Bloodhound Books. So my debut novel was published by HarperCollins, or with their digital imprint HQ Digital, and which is called Deadly Burial. It was a murder mystery about a dead professional wrestler, which I thought was interesting. What better cast of suspects to have than a load of wrestlers?
But the one with the layout, how difficult was it to get the editor and the publisher to agree to doing it?
Well, so I think what probably happened was because Deadly Barrel didn't sell particularly well, so HarperCollins weren't interested in a follow up. So I sort of looked around some more indie, smaller publishers, and Bloodhound, who I've since had a really good relationship with for many books, were kind enough to publish it. And I sometimes, I've never asked them, but I sometimes wonder if it was like, oh, he's come from a big publisher, he's a big shot. Let's let him do what he wants. So it was maybe a once in a lifetime opportunity to have a bit more free reign. Right. So yeah, maybe I didn't realise at the time how fortunate I was to be allowed a bit more creative control over that stuff.
I mean, you took your shot. I mean, that's a fantastic thing to be doing. I think and well done on all the books as well, man. It's a really great achievement that you've done there.
Oh no, thank you.
So when you're actually creating these books, when you're writing, do you listen to music?
Yes, I do.
What genre do you prefer?
So I think you've had guests on in the past. It comes up about do you do music with lyrics or not?
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm definitely in the can't do lyrics. I can't listen to words being said while writing words. So it's all instrumental stuff. And I always end up with soundtracks, and it's usually creepy video game soundtracks. So favourites currently are Silent Hill 2, the original Akira Yamaoka soundtrack, and the Quake 1 soundtrack, the Trent Reznor Nine Inch Nails. It's a banger. Honestly, if you haven't listened to that soundtrack for years, which you probably haven't, just stick it on. It's amazing.
I actually noticed from your website that you had a section on Quake, that you'd made some like maps and stuff for the community.
Yeah, it was like a little rabbit hole. I got really, really obsessively down probably during the pandemic, I think. And it's like, because, it's a 27-year-old video game or whatever. And so I think I just randomly, Quake, I haven't thought about that for years. Let's listen to the music. And then you kind of Googling a bit. And it's like, oh my God, there are all these people still making maps for it. Oh, let's see if I can download it. Oh, they're all free, belting. And then you kind of, before you know it, there's a level editor, and you can get that as well, and that's free. And it's actually got quite a lot of tutorials. Oh, go on, I'll have a go at this then. And it was dead fun. Perfect thing to do when you're stuck in a COVID pandemic.
Quake 2 was one of two games that came with my Nintendo 64. It was Super Mario 64 and Quake 2. And I'm really glad that my mum never saw it, because 7-year-old Nico was learning a lot about violence. That was that was a good time.
Eyes like saucers.
What are you doing? Nothing. Super Mario.
What's the game about then? I don't know, plumbing or something. Yeah.
I don't know. He's got a moustache. That's kind of the narrative. That is the narrative, isn't it? Right. What is the least enjoyable trope of fiction for you?
The one I'm going to go for, there's a few, isn't there? We've all got a few. Rubbish baddies. Rubbish baddies is a bad one. So what I mean by that is, far be it for me to criticise Tolkien on a podcast, but I'm gonna. So when a baddie has been built up, and it's the main, antagonist, and they can't even kill like one hobbit, and they're crap, and like the Uruk-hai, and then Sam Gamgee is just gonna kill all of them, and even though he's just a bloke from a pub. So anything where the threat is just completely dissolves away because the baddies they just don't live up to the hype. That's a frustrating one. I don't know if you can think of any examples of that.
Yeah, I'm just sort of racking my brains. I think a lot of my examples probably come from movies, really, like crap movies. That's a really, because it is almost like there was a period where it felt like the Hollywood movies that I was watching were using it as like a cheat to finish their story, just like, and now the baddie loses. Okay, next one. And yeah, it stands out, doesn't it, to such a massive degree when you have a competent villain.
Yeah.
I can give you an example of a competent villain where it really gave a stark contrast to all these like shit villains that I had been encountering. It was Ozymandias in Watchmen,
Watchmen.
Alan Moore's.
Yeah.
Good one. Very good
Um,
one.
I remember being blown away by that the first time I read it, and almost getting quite excited and being like, oh, "You can do this! People will let you tell stories like this. This is great."
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think
I think I'm on board with that. I think I would definitely agree.
It's definitely twinned really badly with this, especially in sort of young fiction. This idea of these heroes that can do absolutely flipping everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sort of
Like,
Mary Sue kind of
yeah,
thing.
especially, I mean, there's that trope that people always talking about in teen novels where she was awkward and clumsy and really average looking, but also the greatest ninja assassin the world had ever seen.
Oh God,
Come,
yeah.
come on, man. And
Like
then the
bad,
villain is rubbish.
yeah, like badass heroes. Like no, not interested. Not don't want them. But then I was just trying to think, do I want? But am I being a hypocrite because I do want badass villains? Not sure.
I
Yeah,
think
I think characters that find their courage to do something badass feel far more well-rounded and sort of well realized. I think. Like I remember the first time I read, I think it was something like it was Diamonds Are Forever. But the book, not the
Yeah.
movie.
Oh wow.
So, and there's a bit in this one, if I have got the right book, where Bond is being hunted through a car park by Russian agents or something,
yeah.
and he just gets in the back of a car and hides under a blanket, and he is pissing himself with fear because he does not want to be caught in this situation. And I'd grown up watching the Bond movies, Roger Moore kicking people in the face when they bow at him and running away from bullets and all this sort of really like filled with panache and bravado stuff.
Yeah.
So to see the character actually be absolutely bricking it over this and then go on to defeat the villain later on sort of brought it to life a bit more. I don't know.
There's something about like I don't know. I was never a particularly James Bond fan, possibly for that reason. But someone who I did used to like was Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones was particularly in the early. I don't know what's gone wrong recently, but in the early, he's sort of winging it. He's always a bit stressed out. He's terrified half the time because there's a snake or this. But you remember when he's running away at the beginning of the first one? He's like, "Start the engine, Jock! Just start the engine!" Like he's not cool at all. Which was great.
He got absolutely no chill either, which is.
I know you said there were a couple. Do you want to rapid fire a few more off for me, just so I know where we're at with your your level of hatred?
I stupidly didn't write them down. Let me see if I can remember one. Bear with me. Bad tropes of fiction. Oh, I was gonna. This was a really controversial one actually, and it's not really a trope of fiction as such, but just a debate point is trigger warnings. And the reason I'm saying that one is I suppose it's good for information to be available to people who want it, but I just don't want spoilers plastered all over everything. So you even get it with, let's say I've been watching The Last of Us, the TV show. This is maybe a silly example because obviously every episode is going to feature this. But at the beginning when it's like, this episode contains scenes of graphic violence, gore, swearing, and it's like, even that, in a way, is kind of a spoiler of what you could expect from a show. Because you might be going into a show not having a clue what to expect. And so I just wish, I don't know, I wish they were optional rather than unavoidable sometimes.
Those are quite interesting, aren't they? Because sometimes you'll be watching a TV show and it'll flash up and it'll be a 12 or whatever the whole way through. Then you'll hit the episode where they drop the bombs, basically, and then it's a 15 or an 18. So it does... It's almost like a paratext to the story that you're engaging with, which I can sort of see what you're meaning there.
This episode of Teletubbies will feature drug use and sexual violence from the start.
Whenever you see like drug use, nudity, violence, all the rest of it, I always like clap my hands together in a sort of oh, this is going to be a good one.
Here we go.
Right, we're so far off track.
I'm so sorry.
I love this. What is your writing process?
You know that thing of like, are you a plotter or are you a pantser? That question that people sometimes ask. I think I'm actually more of a plotter than I used to think I was. So what I mean is, I tend to not write anything that's without a clear knowledge of what the goal of that bit is, if that makes any sense. So it'll be this is the chapter where they find the dead body, and then this is the chapter where they meet the creepy police chief, and then this is the chapter. So now sometimes I will have written that down, probably in an Excel spreadsheet, sadly. And sometimes the complexity of the story you're planning dictates how much writing down you have to do. So my most recent book is called Chains and came out last year. And my idea was every chapter is a different character's point of view, and they sort of pass the baton of the POV to the next one at the end of the chapter. So it's like Fred's in a coffee shop, he orders a coffee, he's stressed out because he's just crashed his car. Next chapter will be from the perspective of the coffee shop owner, and he's like, "Oh, Fred seemed a bit stressed out. Oh well, off home I go because my shift's over." Chapter 3 is from his wife's perspective. "Oh my God, Bill's home and I'm in bed with another man. Quick, let's get the guy out of here." And so that's kind of how it works, and then you sort of try and link them back and interweave it, and hopefully it works and it's interesting. But obviously that required quite a lot of planning, so that was a bigger spreadsheet, I guess. Whereas other times, if it's a more conventional narrative, you can, to an extent, you can probably hold a lot of that just in your head, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. Like that idea of trying to hold all in your head does become quite distracting when you actually come to write. If you are trying to do something complex, you do find yourself wishing, man, I should have probably written some of this stuff down in a helpful document to remind myself where I was, and
saying things to yourself like, "Oh, I must remember that insert thing."
Yeah.
I must have 100 little notepad documents or notes on my phone or little scribbled notes on post-it notes of bits to do with stories.
Yeah,
totally.
That would be such a mammoth job to collate them and put them into a readable format that's actually useful. So I've got a lot of time for your Excel spreadsheet there. I think that solves one of the problems that one of the difficulties people can get themselves into during the process.
You sometimes, though, having said everything I've just said, you can just end up where you do surprise yourself a bit. I always recount, it was that same book I was on about earlier, Never Rest, is, this is the scene where the detective pays a visit to this horrible bloke who owns the island, and the purpose of the scene is this bloke's horrible and doesn't give anything away. And then somehow, and I don't know how, it just manifested that in this scene, the bloke answered the door and he had this really big dog that was like an Irish wolfhound, like the biggest dog you can get. But instead of like that breed of dog normally is like really nice and friendly, it was like, let's just make this one absolutely horrible and terrifying. And so I was dead happy with the scene and how this guy was kind of intimidating the detective with his horrible dog. But of course, you've created for yourself then like a big loose end, and it's like, right, I need a resolution to this dog now.
Chekhov's Irish wolfhound.
Exactly, that's exactly right.
Chapter from perspective of dog.
that
Might
was
eat
the
food.
answer.
Balls need a licking. Better get that in before the end of the day.
Sequel writes itself, actually.
So that you can get ready for that sequel, how do you know when the book you're writing is finished?
Whoa, that's a good question. Well, we talked earlier about that. You know, like the feeling you're trying to convey. So I think I almost always have. It's not necessarily exactly the ending in mind at the start, although often it is. But I always have the feeling that I want the ending to give the reader. So, which is usually an unpleasant feeling, you know.
I want them to feel disquieted and unnerved every time they open their fridge.
But that's it. There you go. Perfect. Perfect. So it's right. So everything you're doing in the story, to an extent, is almost in service of that ending landing in that way. So once you feel you've captured that feeling you were going for, and you can imagine somebody reading it and having that experience, then that's when it's ready.
That's fascinating.
So do you go straight to it's ready?
It's ready. Yeah.
I also don't do a lot of editing. This makes me a bit of a weirdo, I suppose. I do edit as I go. So my first draft is usually 95% finished, which I have learned is weird.
I'm extremely fucking jealous.
Wow.
Wow.
That is enviable, sir.
Well, not well. Or you could just consider I'm not editing enough. That would be the other thing you could infer. But yeah, no, it's a. I suppose it's a bit of a perfectionist thing. So it's almost like I don't want to start today's writing without looking back over yesterday's and making sure that bit's all perfect. Right, I'm completely happy with that bit. That's done. That bit's done. Now I can go on to the next chapter. So it probably makes the writing process slower to get to the end of your draft, but by the time you've done it, you've kind of done all the editing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So that actually leads me to my follow-up question there, which is that do you have some sort of wisdom about how to actually keep momentum? Because typically, at least I found when I was like teaching myself how to learn how to, write and create stories, I found that if I tried to edit as I went, I just tooled with the same paragraph over and over until I ran out of gas.
Yes.
So how do you keep momentum? How do you generate forward storytelling?
I think you sort of have to quite ruthlessly. So you don't have to plan it to the half hour or anything, but almost like, well, I'm writing for roughly this period of time, and for that to be successful, I need to have produced roughly X words of new content. And so let's say it's a day, and therefore you're writing for 8 hours, let's just say. That means you're not allowed to spend any more than 4, ideally less than half, but 4 absolute maximum on that retrospective editing what you wrote yesterday bit. So it's as long as it's a bit like an exam, and it was sort of like, you've got a 3-hour exam. Oh, but the first question, I've not quite got it right. Oh, well, I can just spend all the 3 hours on this first question. But there's no point because there's no more marks available. You need to get on to question 2, even if question 1's not finished. So there's a thing about just forcing yourself to dedicate chunks of time to output goals. And sometimes you'll blow it away and you'll be like, oh my God, I said I was going to write 2,000 words and I did 5,000 today. Yes. And other times it's like, oh, bollocks, I only got 1,000 and I'm not even sure it was that good. But at least that's better than nil.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000. I mean, 1,000 words fully edited to 95%. That's pretty good, isn't it? I think you could. Do you create quite quickly then? How long would you say it take?
I can. I think I can. I probably say all my novels are relatively short, so they tend to be between 60,000 and 80,000 words. But I can write one of those in 3 to 6 months. I did one once. In fact, sorry, I think you probably this may be one of your questions that you sometimes ask about NaNoWriMo. And I'd managed to do a sort of 70,000 word thing in a month once. For that, which was, hard.
Yeah, but for it to be done, for it to be mostly done as well. Yeah, that is so cool. That's potentially one of the more sort of fascinating answers to that question we've ever had. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, yeah. Hey Ben, I'm kind of going off this guy.
just a weird.
It's the end of his books. Everything's just done. Motherfucker, what's going on here?
Jealousy.
Oh, I'm absolutely riddled with it.
Wait, that's the other thing.
What it does mean though is it means you get, when your publisher, your editor gives you some feedback, which is quite, change this bit, merge these 2 characters, don't like the ending. It can be, I find it really hard to do that then, because I'm like, but it's finished, and perhaps because I'm not as much of an editor normally, I find that bit of then going back and get the scalpel out, that is horrible. So, that bit.
I'm going to ask, because I haven't actually thought to ask anyone this before, but I'm a musician, and when we write music, there are times when like a couple of you have pretty much smashed out a song, and then someone at the end will be like, oh, what if this bit went like this, because they want to have had input. Yeah. Do you ever feel like editors are doing that? Don't name anyone.
No. Yes, well, there was this one person. No, not at all. No, the honest truth is, I think I've had a really good experience with editors throughout my career. So I've always found, whilst it's been really hard to do, I've always found their suggestions to be genuinely, they've improved it, or at the very least, they've not made it worse, and I can understand where they're coming from, and I don't mind. I've never come out of the process thinking, they've messed it up. But I think that, maybe I've just been quite lucky there, because you do hear some sort of, writers will have these horrible experiences where they're not happy with the final product because the editor intervened too much and so on. So I think you do need to be prepared to push back a bit.
Yeah.
But I think the pushback needs to be for this justifiable reason I can articulate. I don't agree with this suggestion, and here's why. Rather than sulk, diva, moan. Oh, I can't believe you would mess with my creation.
Fuck
you,
you!
I mean?
It's my book.
Yeah, that's not a good way to be. I don't think.
It's probably a fairly quick way to get your contract terminated.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's your book.
Yeah.
Just
so you print it, you bind it, you put it on shelves. Yeah. Fascinating.
It's time for my favourite question, Ben.
Nico adores this question. He goes to sleep stroking himself thinking about this question. So
I do. I'll do it. Shall I do it in the voice I have at that time? So, if you could adapt any book into another medium, what book would it be? To which medium, and why?
Oh, that's a good one. I would like to. Does this count?
I don't know yet.
Yes, let's go. Oh no, let's swerve it slightly. So I'm a big video game player, as you probably surmised from some of my earlier kind of comments. So and I love video games as storytelling. It's that immersive medium, isn't it? You're in the story and you're creating it to an extent yourself. Even when it's very linear, it still feels like it's you. So I love experiencing stories through the medium of video games. So I really like China. I never know how to pronounce his surname. Forgive me. Mieville. It's Pedido Street Station, and I read that recently. And we touched, didn't we, earlier on like Dark Souls and Dark Fantasy stuff. It's like imagine playing the video game version of that. Whoa, that would be a good space to muck about in and have a horrible dystopian time.
Would you go straight to FromSoft, or is there another studio you think you'd go to?
Oh, that's a great question. Would I go? I know it's a really obvious answer. I think I probably would go straight to FromSoft actually, because my favourite game of all time is Silent Hill 2, but you wouldn't trust Konami to do anything right these days.
Unless you want it to be a pachinko machine.
Yeah, although of course they are now making a remake, aren't they? They've got Bloober Team working on the Silent Hill 2 remake, which I am tentatively, I'm trying to be like quite positive and optimistic about, but who knows? We will see.
I'd really like it if when it came out, they purposefully set the draw distance super low and put the fog in, so it was just like the original.
Hey, that's what we all want. That's what we'd like to see. I mean, that would be a classic thing that they would get wrong, isn't it? They would go, oh, well, modern standards, we can't possibly have low draw distances, so there's no fog. Here's Silent Hill with beautiful clarity. No!
It's a gorgeous Midwestern American town. Bright sunshine. Oh. Well, yeah, it's not Polygon anymore, so he's now Spherehead.
Yeah, and you can see him. He's all the way over there. Look how clear it is. And he's in 60 FPS. And
hello.
Then it turns out it's a battle royale or an MMO or something.
Oh, God, yeah, there's a multiplayer mode.
No! Do you want the Nurse DLC?
Oh, God.
A bunch of extremely horny whales buying DLC that they shouldn't do.
You're right.
Silent Hill Battle Pass.
This could go really badly wrong, couldn't it, actually?
Oh, no. I really hope they're not listening, because we need less of that in gaming. So
Jenkins, write that down.
So it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, but I'm really keen that we should let people know where they should start reading your work. Like, what book would you direct them to first, or anthology, or anything like that?
Oh no, that's a great question. Thank you so much. I write dark fiction in a few different genres, a bit of science fiction, a bit of horror, but primarily sort of crime and murder mystery thrillers. My sort of most successful, well received, has been a book called Rabbit Hole. Which is about an investigative podcaster who reopens a cold case, and it's more than she bargained for. So if you were going to pick any of my books, I would read Rabbit Hole, and if you like that, read all the others. They're not sequential, they're all standalone, so any order you like. And if you want to find all those books, if you just search for Jon Richter online, it's JonRichter. My website is www.jon-richter.com. You can find me on Twitter @RichterWrites. And I've got Instagram and Facebook presence as well, so all over the place, really. And in a final plug, I'll just mention the couple of podcasts that I co-host. One is called...
do.
Thank you. One is called Dark Natter, where I and my co-host Liam talk about our favourite pieces of dark fiction. And more recently, I have co-hosted Hosts in the Shell with Matt Adcock, who, of course, recently also guest appeared on this show. So check those out too.
Wonderful. Well,
We've
that
got to
is.
get Liam on for the trifecta, haven't we?
Yeah, we're gonna have to get Liam on the triangle. Yeah.
Oh no!
Well, it's been absolutely phenomenal having you and your insight, John. We really enjoyed your story and chatting stories, and then your answers to these questions have been really illuminating. So thank you for your time.
Not at all.
You've been great company, man.
Absolute pleasure, and thank you so much. You're both very kind.
Right, where's those hot knitting needles?
Back to business.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For magnificent beardery, let's cast the Chinicus folliculale spell on Gary Laird. For rich ginger tones on the scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La, How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?